I was not going to let the fact that my hair wasn't fully dry distract from the point that we've actually got some sunlight, and it's decently bright today in December. Hello and welcome to another video about a topic which I've talked loads about recently, and that is knitting. Yeah, I know, we're all doing our own little things to get ourselves through lockdown, but then this is one of mine. I decided I was going to discuss with you and show you everything that I've knitted since this global pandemic thing called COVID-19 happened. And so it was only really something I retook up back in September. I've been able to knit for a long time, probably coming up to 15 years-ish. Like, I remember being able to do it in year 10 of year 5 of primary school, and that's when you're like 9. I remember being able to do it that like autumny time, and I'm assuming I must have known before, like, so I was probably 8 or 9 when I learned, so yeah, like 14, 15 years. And we've had an on and off relationship. Until I was a teenager, I literally knew how to cast on wrong, do a knit stitch, and cast off. That was it. And then I started like watching YouTube videos and learning how to knit properly as a teenager, and like learning how to do a stockinette stitch or stocking stitch, whatever you want to call it, because I learned how to purl and I learned how to cable, and then I would stop doing it and then I would pick it up again. When I was at college studying art, I did a project where I included some knit work, and actually somewhere there's this really cool bit in my sketchbook where I just tried knitting all these different materials and seeing how it turned out. And there are a couple of knitting degrees in the UK, and I for a while considered doing knitwear as a degree when I was applying for fashion degrees. I also considered fashion contour. I considered a lot before I kind of settled in just general, and then didn't even go. And then while didn't do much knitting in between like college and going to uni, second year of uni I literally went to Aldi and picked up a kit which was like knit a teddy bear for like £3. I know, Ella, stupid, what are they making out of? But you picked it up and you bought it anyway, and I knitted a teddy bear in about a week and a half, and it kind of got me back into knitting again last winter. So I then picked up the stuff to make a scarf, and I used some really chunky yarn. I got it done in like less than 2 nights. I probably got it done in 2 nights. This hat and scarf, which went to my sister, and then I bought more yarn and did nothing with it because exams happened. And so we really have had this on-off relationship with knitting for the last like 14, 15 years. And anyway, back in September I was doing an essential shop. Haven't had to do any of them, thankfully, since moving back in with my parents, because we get most of our food delivered. And I was in the aisle of magazines because it was really quiet, and I'm not gonna lie, it was a nice break to get out of the house. And I bought one of those ridiculously priced magazines with wool in to make a teddy bear, like to make a toy. And making toys is a fairly quick way to make something that's knitted, but it can be complicated in terms of having to count all the time. And I like to have knitting projects which are as countless as possible, but the more I've been knitting, the harder it is to find like the next challenging one which you don't have to count. And I knitted this zebra. I no longer own this zebra, but I will put a picture up of the zebra on the screen. It have a new home with someone who I think really enjoys it. We named him Toby. Toby Swat, because he was stripy. And it kind of got me kick-started into wanting to knit again, and I knew that wool was going to sell out in shops. I knew that like it wasn't going to be a thing soon because everyone was going to want to be knitting for lockdown. And actually, if you look on a lot of craft websites at the moment, yarn is like selling a lot more than I've ever seen it sell before in my life. So I went to Hobbycraft again before lockdown happened, and I bought 6 balls of wool to make a jumper pattern that I'd found for free online. And I like did all the calculations, and I worked out that no, 5 wasn't going to be enough. I was definitely going to need 6. Do you want to know how many balls of wool I have left over? 2.5. Like, this jumper actually cost me less than £20 to make. This is still before I'd really considered what fibres I was using when I was knitting, and it's only like 20% wool, and 80% acrylic, and then I've since done some research into like the effects of how they make acrylic wool yarn, and I'm not necessarily happy about it, but we're using up what we've got. And I made this jumper. It's a turtleneck, and it's rainbow, and it looks like more crop than it is, possibly. I absolutely love it. Here's a picture of me wearing it. I learned that I need to learn how to better to stitch stuff together, which I have since done. It was just a lot of fun to do. I did some knitting around to put the collar on, the turtleneck on, and it's probably one of the first times I've knitted around ever, maybe the second. But I really enjoyed it because there's something about it which is just so like thoughtless. You just knit round in a circle. Loved it. And I decided to go through the wool I already had, to try and use some of it up and carry on knitting. So this, I set myself the aim of getting it done by Christmas Eve, and I got it done by first week of November. So it was probably about 5.5 weeks it took me, with a lot of gaps and breaks in that. But yeah, we did it. And so then I was like, I love knitting in the round. It's so easy, you don't have to think. And so I decided to knit a hat. So I used the same size knitting needles for the collar and the hat, just because it's what I had. I'm trying not to have massive, I don't have massive collections of like brown knitting needles, because actually they come in so many sizes. Like every size of knitting needle, like say it's like 5.5mm, you can get it in like 3 to 4 different lengths, so like you'd need a lot. But I decided to make this little bubble hat. Very cute. I kind of created my own pattern for this, just from like, it's not necessarily a hard shape, so it is something you can do yourself. I do create some of my own patterns for knitting, but very rarely. I did a lot more when I was younger, and like being more experimental with stuff, but it's something I'd like to get back into. I love this. This is made from a green that I bought last year, and I think it looks different on camera, but in real life I feel like it's got a touch too much yellow in it, and I'd prefer it to have a little bit more like of a dark blue tone. I think it's just slightly too bright. I feel like in the camera it's almost like the colour I want it, but it's not quite there. And I still had green yarn left over, so I decided to look up how to make mittens. But again, another thing I'd never done or even thought about doing. It always felt too fiddly. But I ordered some double point needles, which was a whole new concept to me and totally scared me, because they, like, you have 3 to 4 needles, sometimes 5 if you're like got 4 and then knitting on, and it's just, it looks terrifying. It looks like any moment all your work's gonna slip off. And actually, I think I've had very few mishaps with them, and the only times I've had mishaps with them has really been when I thought I've got, like, when I've finished a row, put my spare in that hand, turned it all around, and then pulled out not my spare to carry on knitting. I'm like, oh, but I found that when you drop loops like you're not using, so much easier to pick them up than if you were like dropping loops off straight needles. So I taught myself some double point, and I made these mittens. They look like this, so they've got like little ribbed edges to match the hat, and they're just super plain and boring, but I just wanted to give it a go, see if I could do it. And now that I've got this pattern down, I could add a pattern to like the tops and bottoms and do something more creative with them if I wanted to. One of the thumbs is probably like a centimetre too long, where I just was getting too into it and didn't take down the stitches like I probably should have done. But they fit, they work, they're warm. Again, this is like 100% acrylic yarn, which since doing my research I probably wouldn't buy again, but I have quite a bit of it. I'm just going to try and use it up and then convert to stuff which is predominantly natural fibres. Sometimes yarns have a little bit of plastic in them, and I am not 100% plastic free, I won't lie, I'm not perfect, but where I can get to that point, I'm going to get to that point as much as I can. But while I'm using up plastic yarns, I'm using up plastic yarns because actually, if I'm going to make something with them, that's better than them sitting in the corner and not getting used at all. And let's try and do something positive with something that's already here. Reuse it. the next thing I knitted was because there was this ball of wool that I'd bought on a like 3 for 2 in a Hobbycraft about a year ago, because I just loved the colour, I loved how it felt. This is like still 80-90% acrylic and then got some wool in it, and it's this beautiful blue colour, and I made this pair of slippers. So I was looking for something that was like for this size pattern, and I used a pattern from the Drops website. I think they call themselves like Garnish Studios or something, but Drops is basically a company I was looking a lot into because they have fairly affordable, like some of the cheapest I found natural fibre wools and yarns, and so when I next do a yarn shop, I think when I can, that's somewhere that I'd like to consider buying from. And they had this pattern to use as chunky yarn, which is what this is, to make a pair of slippers, and I literally did this in a day. So it's almost like stitching a rectangle. It's so easy, so simple. You just like gather it up at one top so it comes in around the toes. I then went and raided my parents' scrap yarn. So I mainly had balls of yarn that I'd personally kept, and my mum and my dad. My mum crochets and my dad loom knits. So as a family we go for a lot of yarn, and I was like, I'm moving soon, let me donate some yarn to you. And so I was only keeping ones which were like bigger balls and I knew I could do projects with, whereas lots of little ones my parents have from like years of a project where they haven't had to move house. And so I went through theirs and I stole these 2 pink colours to make these little pom-poms, and then can't believe I can say this, by Amazon something, which is really bad and really naughty, but I've had to do it during this time, and also it was going to cost me like so much time and money in delivery to get it anywhere else. Like this was more than 50% cheaper than I could find it somewhere to get it delivered from the UK, and I didn't want to get delivered from abroad if I could help it, so it was like, weighing up everything, and I just don't know if I could get it right. But it's this stuff that I put on the bottom, which is called Sock Stop. It's mainly designed for, I think, kids' clothes. So like when they're like learning to crawl, lots of people were saying they put them on knees and on socks when they were slipping over, but it is like ultimately the stuff they put on those slipper socks you get when you're a kid, and I was like, I want to put some of that on the bottom. So that's what I did. I kind of followed the line of like every other line of the garter stitch, because that's all these are made in. It's not the neatest, and I think next time I would actually do my pattern off the wall, let it dry, and then use it to glue it on, because it kept on getting caught on the yarn. It just didn't work as well as I was expecting. But as an experiment, like the pom-poms and the slippers themselves took me like an afternoon to make, and so then the stuff on the back 12 hours to dry, but maybe 30 minutes at most to put on, and that's stretching it. The next thing I made is for a friend of mine. It needs to go in the post, but it is here. Okay, so this is this little sheep who's got some teddy bear stuffing on him because he's in my like little wall box at the moment. He is again done with double points, just because I wanted to carry on building on that skill that I'd learnt. So also when you use double points, it's one less seam, and I appreciate that. And I've used this like boulet wool to do his body, and this is all from my mum's collection, which she was like, if you're gonna use it, take it, use it, I don't mind. Put little buttons on for the eyes, knitted a little mouth, kind of cute. My friend of mine, did a lot of volunteering on a sheep farm at the beginning of lockdown, because it meant that she could leave the house essentially and spend some time doing that and getting involved and helping out the community. And then the last thing I am going to show you is something which I have not finished yet, but I've started, and it's sort of this project which I'm working on, which is more double point and more practice getting that skill down, and it's the first time I'm using 4 to go round, not 3. So I've done lots of like 3 needles where the needles cross like this, and you add an extra one and it goes like that. But now my needles are already like that, and I'm adding in an extra one, and yeah. If you've done it, you know what I mean. Honestly though, if you take anything from this video, it's that it's not as scary as it looks. And this is what I'm currently knitting. Knitting a little pair of socks. I had to order these colours online and do a click and collect from Hobbycraft. So I think in hindsight I wouldn't have gone for this purple, because this purple almost looked duller online and these purples almost looked brighter, so they looked like they would go together more. Whereas in real life I think it's just not quite the colour combo I was expecting. But I'm going to go with it and rock it for this pair. I already know there's probably about 10 mistakes in those already and I've not even finished them yet. The second one will be like 5 mistakes, and then hopefully I'll get them a lot better once they're going. I'm also just starting another jumper. I'm trying to get into the habit of having a small project and a big project at once, so that I can have one thing where I'm not having to count anything, hopefully at one time, and one thing where I'm having to count stuff, so I can just kind of swap them over. This is also one of the first times I've used a 4-ply and not a double knit or wider, and I was really worried because I was like, oh, it's going to take forever, it's going to be really fiddly, but actually I've really enjoyed how it's worked and how it's knitted. It's not knitted up quicker than larger yarn would, but I think I found that, I don't know, maybe it's just matched really well with the needle sizes, gone really nice and smoothly. All my double point needles and all my circular needles which I've used for these projects have been by this brand called Knit Pro, who I had never even heard of before like a month ago, and I'm now obsessed with them. Whenever I buy needles I want it to be from them. There's some I can't stand with needles and I know they're better for the environment, but I just prefer the feeling of the metal like slidiness and shininess, and nothing ever gets caught on them and you don't ever get like dents in them. I just prefer it. And so I was ordering them from Amazon again, because as much as I want to reduce my use of Amazon, it was the cheapest and quickest way to get the needles, which I know is just not helping to support smaller craft shops, and even Hobbycraft didn't have double point needles in the size that I needed, and it's something I need to address and work on, but it's what I did, I won't lie. But highly recommend that brand. And actually one other thing that I'll show you, even though this video is getting super long, is one thing that I bought. Here we go. Which I didn't even realise was Knit Pro at the time. I bought it because it's cute and reduced on Amazon. And I was like, oh, that's cute. Oh, it's an elephant. I love anything elephant. And it's an elephant and knitting. And it's this little elephant here. And essentially, these bits you've got around the top and the bottom measure your needles. So if you've got needles where the numbers might have rubbed out or you're not 100% sure, you can check them. This bit here is a 10cm ruler, and it's a 3cm up the side. I don't know quite why you'd want a 3cm, but I guess you can measure an inch with the measurements easier in that bit. But when you're doing your gauge, this is super useful. And then what it's got in between this trunk here is this little blade, which I'm assuming at some point is going to die, but it's so useful just to have to cut your yarn with. In fact, I have gone and taken knitting with me and not taken a pair of scissors, knowing that I've got this with me. I find it easier, find it great just to kind of like hold and pick up, and I'm not worried about it stabbing in my basket of project. So yeah, right, I've been blabbering on for 18 minutes and that's long and boring to most people, but I've really enjoyed getting back into knitting during this lockdown period, and I would highly recommend you give it a go. Thank you very much for watching, see you soon, bye!